Merry Christmas. We're hoping that this is a really fun and lavishly celebrated meeting. I'm going to introduce Ruth. Ruth is our speaker tonight. She is an author and a blogger who is going to come and speak to us her wisdom. And then she brought some of her wonderful things to share with us at our table here too. So Ruth, come on up.
Okay, I wish somebody would have told me to wear my pajamas. I love things like this. I would have wore my pajamas tonight. I'm serious. That would have been so much fun. But it's too late now, and then I'm looking at all these presents thinking, oh, I wish I would have brought 3 presents. Because that's so fun. Anyways, it's great to be here. I was also here this morning, so now I'm like, oh boy, it's almost 8 o'clock, and when you speak in the morning and then you don't speak till late at night, I'm like I gotta wake myself up a little bit. But it's so good to be here. My name is Ruth Schwenk, like she said, and my husband is a pastor, and we have 4 children. Tyler is 13, Bella is 11, Noah is 9, and Sophia is 6. And we have been in ministry for about 15 years. We've been married for a little over 16 years. And actually, I'm familiar with this area because I grew up in Ann Arbor and in South Lyon. So I'm actually from around here, and we've been in Ohio for about the last 15 years, but we actually just moved back the beginning of November to plant a church in Ann Arbor. So here we are again, and I love this area, so it's so great to be here. It actually worked out perfect. I didn't know I would be living here. They talked to me about speaking here several months ago. So I'm like, well, that's easy. I'll just drive about 30 minutes. So it's so great to be here. Like she said, I am an author, but let me just give you a little bit of background on that. A few years ago, I really felt God calling me into mom ministry, and I wasn't sure how that would look. Obviously my husband is a pastor. I didn't know if it was at the church we were at, but I really prayed about it for quite a while and realized that he was calling me to start an online ministry. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But I started a website called thebettermom.com, and we have over 30 writers from they're moms from all different stages of motherhood. And the one thing I love about groups like this is I love that we can come together and we can learn and grow and we can have fun, and that really is the heart behind my site as well. And so it's just been an incredible experience. We have hundreds of thousands of moms coming every single month just to learn and grow, and we've just built such an awesome community there. So through that, we just released, I don't know if you have heard of Karen Eman. She is with Proverbs 31 Ministries. Karen Eman and I wrote a book for moms called Hoodwinked, 10 Myths Moms Believe and Why We All Need to Knock It Off. And so Karen and I sat down and just talked about all the different things the lies that we believed about motherhood that were affecting our parenting that we maybe didn't even realize. And so we came up with 10 myths, and honestly, I think the best thing that we have heard, the feedback that we've heard is moms stating how free they feel after reading this. That it's just, there's freedom in knowing that we're all in this together. So those are available at the table along with curriculum, DVD, and Karen and I are coming out with a devotional for moms, and that is in March that we come out with that. But I have samplers at the table over here, and they're free. So if you would like one, please just come and see me afterwards. So tonight we are going to talk about rest. And, or the lack thereof for a lot of us, right? Well, actually, I'm not in that stage anymore. I used to get no sleep at night, and I'm kind of past the physical exhaustion stage, and now I'm in the emotional exhaustion stage. I'm like, oh, I'm not tired, but I just can't think anymore, and, I can't talk about that anymore. But we're going to talk about rest, and as you know, your theme for MOPS this year has been celebrating lavishly, embracing rest, and noticing goodness. And I want to talk about rest because I believe that in order to celebrate lavishly and in order to notice the goodness that is all around, we first have to build that foundation in rest. We have to learn how to rest. So a few years ago, my oldest son Tyler, he had been saving his money for a hamster. And so we bought him a hamster. Well, he bought himself a hamster. But I don't even know how we got to that point because for so many years I was having nightmares of when my hamsters would get loose when I was little, and we would find them dead. And so I had said no. And finally I must have been feeling vulnerable or something because he ended up getting a hamster. Well, Tyler had this hamster for about 3 weeks. And he decided it was just too much work. I think it was probably at about that time that I was like, Tyler, you're going to have to, it's starting to stink. You're going to have to clean its cage. He's probably like, oh, I'm not doing this. So Tyler sold his hamster, its cage, the extra bedding, the food, the little ball that rolls around it. He sold it all to his sister, Bella, for $2. And Bella was so excited because she really wanted the hamster. So Bella affectionately named this hamster Ginger. Now Ginger is still with us. She's a few years old, but she's still alive. And, Ginger's pretty much been a non-factor. She's gotten loose a few times. But there's one thing, one annoying habit that Ginger has that I was not prepared for in any way. Well, I didn't know, first of all, that hamsters don't sleep at night. So that's the first problem. So this is what happens. Every night, I'm getting in bed, I'm tired, it's quiet. I know you probably totally get what I'm saying. You're getting in bed, you're snuggled up, and you're just falling asleep. Well, about that time, Ginger wakes up. And Ginger's just across the hall in her cage. And so she wakes up and she gets herself ready for her day. And she cleans herself off, she gets a drink of water, fills her cheeks with food, she climbs up her little hamster tube and goes into her hamster wheel. Well, her very squeaky hamster wheel. And she starts running on this hamster wheel and she runs all night long. And so I have listened to that hamster wheel so many times at night. And one night, it dawned on me as I was listening to Ginger that really my life as a mom so many times can feel just like that. Like I am in my own hamster wheel and I am running and running and running and I'm trapped and I can't get out. And I felt just like Ginger in that moment. I identified with a hamster. And and I thought, gosh, if I could just press the pause button on my life. Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever feel like, gosh, if I could just push the pause button for just a little bit, just long enough to catch my breath? Well, I think we all struggle with that. And the truth is I think that in our rushing around, we can tend to miss out on those moments that God has for us, that He wants for us to delight in and to learn from. Now, I'm not here tonight to talk about rest because I have it all figured out, because I have a step-by-step method to getting more rest. To be totally honest, I had to come to a place in my life where I admitted defeat, that I just couldn't do it all. Because that's my personality. I want to do it all. Actually, that's why I want to be a part of this party, right? I'm like, oh, this is so fun. I could stay here all night. We could open these presents. But I want to do it all. And I had to come to a place where I realized I just couldn't. So how do we do that? How do we find rest? How do we come to that place? How do we begin to get a hold of our schedules and our time? How can we take steps towards walking more purposefully, more awake, and more alive? Is it even possible for us to step off of our hamster wheels? Well, I believe that this all starts with us seeing time as God does. So we're going to start with talking about what rest is, then why we rest, and then some practical steps on how we can rest. So first of all, what is rest? Well, when we look at the Bible, we see that rest is shalom, it's wholeness, it's peace. In Genesis 2:1-2, it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all of the work of creating that he had done." So there's two things that we see here in this passage. First of all, we see that God didn't rest because he needed a break, but he rested because everything was as it should be. I love that. Everything was as it should be. So there was this peace and there was this wholeness. And the second thing we see here, which I absolutely love, it changed my whole perspective on time, is that we see that there is something sacred about time. So let me just read this part of the verse to you again. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested. So it's saying here that the day was holy because he rested. And I don't know about you, but I had never really thought about time in relation to being holy and sacred. But that's what made the day holy, because he actually rested. So when we rest, it brings peace and it brings wholeness. So why should we rest? Deuteronomy 5:15 says, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." So whenever we hear therefore, we go back and see what it's talking about. So it says, therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. He's pointing back to the fact that he had brought them out of slavery. He had brought them out of Egypt, and he had brought them to freedom. And so what is happening here is God saying that rest brings freedom, just like I brought you out of slavery. Observe the Sabbath day. The rest that you experience will bring freedom. How many of us here feel like slaves to our schedule? How many of us feel like we're a slave to our to-do list, to our never-ending demands? And so I love when we can see this picture in Scripture that so relates to us, because gosh, we can feel like slaves in so many areas. And here God is saying, you were in slavery. I brought you out of slavery. Therefore, observe the Sabbath day, because true freedom is found in rest. I love that. You know, this is really difficult, especially in a Western culture that esteems action. And we think that success is doing more, being more. And I get it. I understand, because I struggle with that. I'm a doer. I like things to be accomplished. I thrive on excellence, all of those things. So I get it. I understand. But I think so many of us put that pressure on ourselves. So this is a really silly story from several years ago. This illustrates this perfectly. But I was, we'd been married for maybe 5 years. I had one child, and he was about a year old at the time. And at that time, I was staying home with him. And so where we were living at the time, we lived in this house, and it was on a corner, and the whole side was windows. And so if I was sitting in the living room, I could see out all the windows. And I could also see the street. And whenever my husband was coming home, you would see him, he'd come up over the railroad tracks and down our street. And so I would see when he was coming. So sometimes when I was sitting on the couch and I looked over and saw him coming over the railroad tracks, and don't tell me that none of you have ever done this if you heard the garage door or something, but I would look over and see him coming, and I would jump up. And I would just act like I was working so hard. You know, like I had to pretend like I was really, really busy at that moment. Because I had it in my head that if he walked in, he would think I had been doing nothing all day long. And so finally, after I'd done this for a very long time, I thought, this is the silliest thing ever. Like, he probably isn't even thinking anything. I think I was probably tired of jumping up, too. And so I decided I was going to tell him. So I told him what I had been doing, and I asked him what he would think. And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he's like, I wouldn't even think anything. And so that just shows you the pressure that we put on ourselves. It was really me saying, you've got to get up, you've got to do something. You can't just sit here. So we live in this culture that esteems action, and it's really, really hard to just rest. And, I've come to understand that the only way for the best of who I am to pour out to my family, in my ministry, in my work, is to slow down. And it's really, really hard. And it's not something that I think you come to all at once and then the rest of your life you're fine with it. It's something that you have to realize over and over again. So how can we rest? Well, we're going to talk about a few basic principles here, but the reason, and they may seem really basic to you, but I think so many times we talk about the basic things, but how many of us are actually putting those things into practice? So here are a few ways that we can learn how to rest. And the very first thing on the list is to practice Sabbath. Now, I'm not referring to sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. We are not bound by the law. However, there is so much that we can learn when we look at Scripture and see what God had put in place for His people. And so I believe that when we set that rhythm of Sabbath, however that looks for your family, that we find peace and wholeness in that. So let me give you an example, because some of you are probably sitting here going, yeah, right, I can't do that every week, and I get it. And so I think what most of us do is if we can't take a whole entire day that we know everybody's going to be there, we just say forget it. Well, then we just can't do that. But I want to say that what would it look like in your family if you decided, you know what, every week, every Thursday night for a few hours, every Friday night for a few hours, whatever day of the week works for you, or maybe you in your schedule and in your family and in your circumstances, you can take an entire day. But I would really encourage you to set aside time every week where you can practice the Sabbath with your family, where you can, as a family, unwind, step back, and really enjoy that time together. And again, some of you, it might not be that you can say every Tuesday night I can do that. Your schedule might be all over the place all the time, so maybe that's week by week that you have to decide what chunk of time will work for you and your family. And so I'll give you some examples of things we've done in the past to make that time special. I encourage you to incorporate special traditions, such as a special meal. Okay, and for us, I'm talking like you could have some spaghetti and the kids would be excited. You know what I mean? And some special garlic bread and light some candles. So it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but I think kids know when you're making it feel special. Maybe you have a devotional that you just read during those times. I encourage you to pray over your children during those times. Play games, there's all sorts of things you can do. Those are just some ideas. So first of all, practice Sabbath. Next, guard your values and your time. And this simply is a way for us to live more proactively than reactively. So as moms, we have all sorts of things coming our way. We have enough to think about, and then we're moms. And so we have all sorts of things coming our way. And so if we learn to live proactively, it's less likely that we are caught off guard over and over again. So I would encourage you to take some time to think and pray through the things that are most important to you. And these are the non-negotiables in your life. So it might be time with the Lord. Here, I'll give you a few of mine. Time with the Lord, daily time with the Lord, pass along faith to the next generation. Fun. I want to be a fun and loving mom who is present and take care of my home. I want to be a loving and encouraging wife. These are just a few of the things that I've written down. It's going to look different for all of us. But I really encourage you to write those things that are the most important to you down. And I know you've probably thought about them before, but if you're anything like me, 4 kids later, I used to remember everything. I don't know what happened, but I seriously cannot remember anything now. So don't let them just float around in your brain. Write them down. It really makes a difference, and put them somewhere where you are reminded often, because we all need to be reminded often. We're so forgetful. I am so forgetful. I have to be reminded often. So guard your values and your time. So now that you have, and then thirdly, put your values and calling on a calendar, and I'll explain this. So now that you have your values and your priorities, those non-negotiables in your life written down, then you can actually plug them into a calendar like they just were there when you bought your planner at the store. So for me, if I know that every day I want to have a daily quiet time with the Lord from 6:30 to 7 in the morning, then that's just on my calendar. That's just there. It's always there. So anything that is a non-negotiable in your life, plug in like it's always been there. And then build other things around it, if that makes sense. So this enables you then to take it a step further. And one thing people ask me often is, oh my word, how do you do all that you do? Well, first of all, I don't do it all alone. I have people that help me, but that help me with the websites and everything. But one way that I have found, been able to do this and still rest is building my calling in after my priorities. So if I've written my priorities into my calendar, I know those non-negotiables in my life, then I say, God, you know, you've really been stirring in my heart and calling me to do this or to be involved in this. Then I can put those things in my calendar. So I'm building those other callings around those non-negotiable priorities in my life, if that makes sense. Now, let me just say that I really, you know, all of us here are moms. Definitely that's our calling. We're definitely called to be moms. That's the first thing that I'm called to be. But that doesn't mean that God hasn't called me to be and do other things. And as a child, as a mom, your core identity is not in just being a mom. It's being a child of God. And so I just would encourage you, maybe He's not calling you to be a part of anything else. Maybe you already are, but I would really, really encourage you to always take a look at those non-negotiables of your life and then build those other things He's calling you to do around that. And for me, I mean, this literally every single year I have to come back to, there's actually in the back of Hoodwinked, I included it in the back of here because it's been so helpful to me, but it's a yearly personal inventory for moms, and a mentor of mine gave that to me several years ago and encouraged me to do that every year, and it has, I'm serious, I think it's like kept me on track, because at the end of every year you come back and say, oh my word, what happened, and I've got to fix this, and I can't do that, and I need to be a part of that, and not that, you know how that goes. So anyways, this is a way that you can put those non-negotiables in, and then whatever God's calling you to do, you can plug in where that fits instead of taking over your priorities. And you know, ultimately, the reason it's so important to understand your priorities and your calling and schedule them is then you have the ability to find those other margins for rest. And overall, you just feel more at peace and more at rest when you're living your life intentionally. And I know it's hard, so I'm not up here saying that because I have it all figured out. It's a constant battle for me. But we always feel more at peace when we're living our life intentionally. Practicing rest, Sabbath, and understanding our values and our calling always leads to greater clarity. And we can then live on mission and not in a mess. So, about this time every year, actually it happens every few months, I think I see a new planner, okay? I don't know how many planners exist, but there's way too many. Because every few months I see a new planner and I think, oh, well, I wonder if I should get that planner. You know, like the one I just got 3 months ago is not working for me. And then I see the new journals, and I see the colored pens and the pencils and the sticky notes and those systems that make it seem like you have it all together, right? And I think if I could just get the right planner and the right journal and the right pens and the right sticky notes and the right system, well then then I'm going to have it all together. And it's so silly that every year I find myself in that spot. I mean, and then you go to rock, paper, scissors, right? And you want every little notepad in there because it's just so cute. And then I could write that list here and that list there, and everything will be so organized, and I'll have it all together. Rock, paper, scissors is a store downtown Ann Arbor. It's really cute. Yeah, it's really cute. They have all sorts of things like that. I shouldn't go in there. But the truth is that no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. And in reality, no matter how hard any of us try, it's never going to be enough. Because ultimately, our rest is found in a person, and it's not found in a plan or a place. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus is saying here that when we find our rest in him, our yoke will be easy. But he's not saying that our life will be easy. What he is saying here, I love this, don't miss this. You might want to write this down so that you don't ever forget it, because I just love it. But he's saying that we will have an easy soul. It means our souls can experience peace and order even if there is disorder all around us. And then it makes sense to me. I can experience rest. I can have an easy soul when I lean on Jesus. We can plan, organize, and build margins for rest in our life. But in all of our attempts to get it all just right, we must not lose sight of the real source of peace. And the real place to find rest is not just in practicing the right disciplines, establishing the right priorities, but the real and lasting rest for your soul is found by staying close to a person, and that is Jesus. And it's only then that we will truly be able to celebrate lavishly, embrace rest, and notice the goodness all around us. Thank you.